Hi there, my name is Philip Ideson. I want to welcome you to the Art of Procurement podcast, the podcast that helps you, a forward-thinking procurement professional, position yourself and your team to proactively take advantage of the revolution that's taking place in procurement today. By interviewing industry trailblazers and sharing insights from our own experiences, my team and I pull back the curtain and shine a light on the strategies, tactics, and tools that procurement teams are using to elevate their impact. And today on the show, I'm joined by 20-plus year procurement leader turned Ironman, Vytas Sliesoraitis. And as we discuss in the podcast, Vytas has a diverse procurement background from Intel in his native Brazil to leading procurement at Google X, which is Google's R&D company. And then most recently as Global Head of Procurement at Epic Games, makers of Fortnite. In this conversation, we discuss a number of learnings from Vytas' experience, especially focused on connecting the dots between regional and global buying strategies and the different approach to procurement that's necessary when supporting innovation at scale, as he and his team did at Google X. We then discuss Vytas' personal challenge to participate in and compete in an Ironman, and that is really his own personal moonshot. And of course, this wouldn't be a procurement podcast without Vytas sharing the learnings he took from that journey into his procurement career. So let's start, as we always do, with me asking Vytas if he found procurement or if procurement found him.
Great question. I love it. And so procurement actually found me in the first place, Philip. So I started actually my career back in Brazil, right, early in the day and at Intel and in tech. And I was responsible for facilities and logistics, right, and importation, exportation, and office operations. And one of the stakeholders was actually procurement, was the head of procurement. Yeah. And based on the exposure I had to him at the time, he asked me if I would be interested in joining procurement. And that's when my career actually started. I was the procurement specialist at Intel for Latin America, which is primarily a marketing and sales office, and covering all the different categories from marketing to IT, professional services, and facilities in itself. So that's primarily how I started my career in procurement. So from Intel, I went to Google in Brazil for 3 years, developing procurement as a function down there. I was the first resource to be hired, and which led me to move into Mountain View in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, where I'm based now. And but that's primarily, again, my career. And then after Google, I went to Epic Games, which was, again, my most recent experience.
And Epic Games is Fortnite.
Exactly. It is Fortnite. Yes. Fortnite is the very successful and popular battle royale game. They launched in 2017, I think. And even though Epic has been around for 30 years or so, but with Fortnite came tremendous growth in terms of user and revenue and their operation, right, internally. So then I had the opportunity to actually join their team back in 2021.
Yeah, Fortnite is like the battle royale that my son and I have about whether he's allowed to play it or not.
Right.
As a 9.5-year-old, he thinks he is, and I'm not quite so sure yet.
Yes, you're not alone on that. I'm sure it's the same battle that many of the parents have these days. Yeah.
Let's go back to Intel.
Sure.
You said as you began your career at Intel, that's how you kind of came into procurement.
Yes.
When you jumped into those categories, you were managing those at a local level, or were you managing those at a global level?
No, so it was mostly local level. Yeah. So at Intel, we have the indirect procurement organization, and then you have a global category lead based in the US, where Intel is headquartered in Folsom here, California. And then I have the regional leads, and myself being one of them. So I have the local strategies for local countries in Latin America, like Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, and Mexico as well, but primarily doing local strategies. Yeah.
And I've had roles where I've both been local and global in my responsibilities. And what's interesting, you don't necessarily think about, if you've always just been in a global role, that there really isn't such a thing as a global strategy.
Yeah.
Or you can have a global strategy, but the execution has to be tailored to each region. So how did you kind of balance the global strategies that were set in North America with actually, I got to make this fit for purpose locally.
Right. No, look, this is a great point of observation. I completely agree. So I think for you to be successfully globally, right, being a category lead, you need to actually build your strategy in conjunction with the regions, right? Think about Latin America, Asia Pacific, Europe, and Middle East. So when you're building your category strategy for a certain year or period of time, you need to actually consult the regional leads to get the nuances. Otherwise, to your point, when it comes to execution, maybe you assumed something would work for the region, but actually doesn't, right? And then you're unable to be successful deploying those strategies in the region. So what I learned to do was first, again, bring that to the attention of the category leads when I was based in the regions. And then at Google, when I moved to the US, and I suddenly became the global category lead, first for legal, then for construction, facilities, management, and logistics, leading the team. Then I'm like, great, I actually know the nuances for Latin America, and I want to make sure that I capture as well the needs from APAC, EMEA, etc. when we are developing those strategies, because otherwise you're unable to be successful, not only within procurement, but also with your end user, if you will, which is your stakeholders, right? So at the end of the day, you need to make sure that your strategies resonate, with them at a local and regional level as well.
And local and regional stakeholders, I always found, were really skeptical about any globally directed strategies. How they don't take into account my nuances, or there's always reasons why, a local stakeholder may believe that it doesn't work. Some of that may be real, and some of it may be control reasons. But it's always something to overcome as you're trying to, one, make sure that the strategy is fit for purpose, but two, then convince the local stakeholders to actually implement.
Yes, I think you are spot on there. So when I refer to consulting the regional leads, right? Those regional leads, myself included, was at Intel and also Google in Latin America. Like my role to be really successful, to make sure that I capture the voice of my stakeholders when we are discussing those category strategies with the global leads, right? To make sure we're addressing those needs. And so if you're doing that, this is like half a battle. And so when it comes to executing those strategies and working with your stakeholders, they will like reassure that, great, Vytas or whoever is the regional leads heard what I have to say. I'm glad they actually incorporate my nuances here. So I think the key word there, Philip, it's flexibility, right? You need to be flexible. If you try to be too rigid, this is actually in general in procurement, I think, if you try to come with a very strong stake on every single category strategy or project or program, like this is our way, like most likely you won't be successful, especially in non-mandate environments, right? Where you are acting as internal consultant. You need to make sure you're flexible and you're able to adapt to your stakeholder needs and their problems or their opportunities and their big things that they're trying to do, right?
Now, when you moved to Google, you said your first role at Google was from a Latin American. It was into a Latin America role. Google was a much smaller company than it is today. This was back, I think, 2007 time.
Correct.
And you were the first employee within procurement within Latin America.
Yes.
I'm interested, kind of, how did you convince the local stakeholders that procurement, and I use kind of air quotes over the word procurement, could actually help them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So back 2007, I think we had at the office 100 people, and I think today we have maybe 1,500 in São Paulo alone. And globally, we had 13,000 employees at Google in 2007. I think today we may have around 150,000, I think. So you can have an idea. But you're right. For me, coming to the role, being new to the company, and also establishing procurement as a function, everything was new to them, right? So my approach then, Philip, to be able to build rapport, with them, was to do a little bit of what I mentioned before, was like let me first understand how they operate, right?
Yeah.
How are they buying today? How are they actually contracting, selecting suppliers, managing them? What are some of the pain points, etc.? So the first, I think, month or so was primarily meetings and actually shadowing some of those individuals there in the region to understand how they operate. And then what I decided to do was to develop a program to explain, look, and go for the low-hanging fruits. There were like simple things that could be done, but highly effective. And this is like trying to speed up the contracting process by having standard templates, right? And working with legal. So because it was taking too long. That's like one example of something that we've done, quickly and was highly effective. The other piece was, look, we are some categories were like too fragmented. We have like dozens of suppliers, and we're like, can we consolidate or 2 or 3, right? And we can negotiate all the terms and conditions ahead of the time, right? When you need to use them, and we create the concept of a preferred partner list.
Yeah.
So this got a lot of traction with the stakeholders. So by exploring those low-hanging fruits and right off the beginning of the engagement with them, I was able to build the credibility for the function, right? And myself in the role down there. And then again, once they trust you and they see the value that we're able to add, then all of a sudden you kind of have the opposite problem. They're coming to you with too much, more than what you can do. And then you need to prioritize and focus on, again, where you can add most impact. But that's primarily how I was able to develop the report and also influence and the relationship with the stakeholders from Google in the region.
So what you say about prioritization, then when you have too much inbound work coming in, that's something that I'm sure a lot of listeners resonate. We're always being asked to do more with less. How did you kind of approach that and think about where you were best suited to use the limited resources that you did have then? Now you've made this case for everybody should use procurement.
Yes.
And now you're being too successful.
Yes, exactly. So I think at that point, probably what I did actually, and what makes sense, what I encourage people to do, which we discussed a little bit about it before, like that's what becomes your category or strategy for your area, right? You're able to work with the stakeholders to let them know, like, look, this is all the things I heard, right? In terms of opportunities or problems, and how do we prioritize together here? Primarily putting together a roadmap, right, of projects and programs, and you can agree on a certain timeline. Usually, you do that for a year or so, and then are able to prioritize where you want to focus the attention from, again, your own resources as well as the stakeholder side. So that's primarily what I've done back in the day. Was let's develop a category strategy here. Or regional strategy actually for Latin America. And then you start to also think more strategically. So some of the things we've done was, can we rely on a third-party resource or a temp resource to help us in some of the tactical activities from procurement? So you can start to maybe make the case to increase some of the headcounts, right, or structure you have. You can start to think about, again, automate some of the processes that you've been using. So you start to get more strategic around other things that you can do to enable more bandwidth for yourself.
I really love the coming together, like looking strategically across the region against categories, because what I find is a lot of times your stakeholder groups are competing with each other for your resource. And maybe they don't even know that they're doing that. It's something that's in our head rather than theirs, because we're trying to serve everybody. But actually getting everybody across your stakeholder groups to then look and say, okay, so it's like they're a steering committee of organizationally what's the most important. And actually it might not be helping somebody within marketing work on $10,000, $50,000 projects. It may be this other idea which is actually going to drive revenue in a different way that everyone recognizes important. So they understand that when you're not supporting them in one area, it's actually for the good of the company.
Correct.
And have everyone make that decision at that level above procurement, so you can focus on execution.
Yeah, absolutely right. So at the time I rely on build those partnerships with the controllers, the regional controller
Mm-hmm.
for Latin America, right, which had that view for the entire region among our alongside with procurement, as well as the regional country or directors, right, for Brazil, Argentina, and Chile, will say, look, this is everything we have. This is the strategy. And make sure we consult with them to understand what their priorities are. But you're right, like procurement was kind of tying the pieces together, right? And having kind of the unique view to be the glue between the different functions on creating that strategy for all the region. Yeah.
Now, I know that the last role before you left Google you had was as Global Head of Category Management, but there was one role before that I actually want to touch on before we dig into a different topic that I'd like to, to chat with you around, and that was you took leadership of essentially procurement supporting Google X.
Correct.
And that's fascinating for me. We've done a big content piece within Art of Procurement and continue to do really over the next year and beyond around thinking about how we 10x our profession. How do we take down the boundaries of what we do in procurement and rethink kind of the art of the possible, and then work backwards to put in place the processes, the technologies, the people that we need to be able to deliver against that new kind of value proposition. When you're at Google X, just for folks who aren't familiar with what Google X is, I wonder if you could just give a little bit of a primer.
Of course, no, absolutely, yeah. So you're right. At Google, my last role there was the global head of category management for construction for both data centers, office spaces, and facilities, plus logistics. But the role previous to that, I was able to actually develop the procurement function for that support Google X. So Google X is the called the Moonshot factor, right? Yeah. So primarily is the R&D research and development team that is involved in very complex and interesting projects and programs, right? So it started maybe 5 years back within Google, led by one of the founders, Sergey, right? Sergey, alongside with Larry was again CEO for Google, and then Sergey was actually led in Google X. But some of the projects that came from Google X, right, for people to be familiarized, is the self-driven car, which is called Waymo, right? These days, started within Google X. It's pretty much an incubator internally at Google, and for very audacious ideas and plans and projects. And some of them will pay off, others will not. And when it reaches certain maturity, then primarily you graduate and you become your own entity within Google or Alphabet now, right? So Waymo became again its own standing program. But some of the projects that I worked on was the self-driven car, Waymo, the Project Loon, which was again a high altitude balloon that provide internet connection for very remote regions of the globe. They actually deployed that during I'm not sure if you remember, but the hurricane, I think it was Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico a few years back. They actually deployed Google Project Loon there to provide internet connection because, again, the power was down and everything else, right, in the island. So, and then many other projects as well came from that. But that's how I got involved. Really exciting time. I think it was probably 2.5 to 3 years when we had a team involved in Google X.
So as the team building moonshots, they're taking moonshots, should I say, and developing and delivering new products, new services. How does that require you to think differently about procurement and how kind of adapting the typical procurement processes to that kind of really move quick and experiment environment?
Yes, no, absolutely. So at that point, right, my expertise and for most of the team was mostly on indirect procurement. And at Google X was a mix between indirect as well, because we're building actual products, right? Think about all the components that go into the self-driven car or the payload of equipments for Project Loon, etc. So Some of the things that we did to adapt was first is to build that expertise within the team, but also hire people with that knowledge, right? So the time we went to the industry, and we got people from Apple, Tesla, and others as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then the aha moment at the time for us, Philip, was understand kind of a product life cycle, right? Which starts with an inception of idea. Then you build a prototype of that specific product. You test, then you launch, and then you commercialize or scale, right? So by understanding that life cycle, we're like, great. So all products here from Google X, or most of them, are going to be following through this cycle. So what our service offering from procurement, right, should actually be able to mirror, each of those stages. There would be a different offering or value add from our side. So think about the Waymo or Project Loan. You approach a supplier that may not offer a specific service or product that exists because those products are so innovative.
Yeah.
So a lot of what we have to do was to find and develop the suppliers actually to be ready to work with Google X, right? So we needed to adapt the agreements for R&D, which includes, again, IP clauses for intellectual property, confidentiality, and also scalability, because some of those products, again, would scale, right, drastically, and others, may not. So we needed to actually adapt the way the procurement worked. And then I think you touched an important point about the agility. We needed to be quick and fast. So I think one of the successes part of the reason why we're successful there was to build the structure ahead of the need, right? Hire the people, build the processes, learn about the product life cycle, and then start to get those early wins with different products and project teams, and to then be engaged, much more frequently, right? So that's primarily what we've done. So that's kind of summarize some of the key learnings or how we adapted to support Google X.
Yeah, I imagine supplier relationships being really important because you've got all these suppliers taking a bit of a leap of faith as well, because they never really know if a product is going to come to fruition when you're going through that R&D phase.
Yes, absolutely. You are pretty much selling then. You are selling the dream, right?
Yeah.
And the same way as engineers are selling you the dream as part of procurement to get you involved. And to your point, like, this is the other piece we also learn, which is important. Not to be too attached to a specific program or project. Learn to be resilient to some of the things you're working on gonna pay off and be successful, and others, will fail. And that's okay. So you're gonna watch your peers and your colleagues to be involved in projects that are gonna grow, and then others, the company may decide to sunset then and not move forward, right? And so the key thing was like, it's okay. Let's learn to be resilient. Let's see what we learn as part of that project, and let's apply it to the next one. So that was another key thing that we learned by supporting the Moonshot factor there.
Well, I know that's probably a whole podcast that we can create out of talking about Google X, because I'm sure there's lots of other fascinating insights. But I actually want to ask you the reason why we first connected, and I know that we've connected and at various different events, procurement events around the country. But I actually came across something on LinkedIn that was really interesting to me that you posted. I think maybe a month or so before Christmas.
Correct.
There was talking about. Not running, it's participating in your first Ironman, and some lessons that you had learned from that you thought were valuable in terms of how to think about procurement. And what I wanted to, first of all, actually to ask you what was going through your head when you said, you know what, I'm going to do an Ironman.
Right, exactly. I think I was crazy. I was like, I was being myself. I'm just kidding. So I always, it's one of my personal values to challenge myself, right? And raise the bar and be an achiever on things that I've been involved on, from personal side to career wise, etc. And so I got into triathlon back in 2019, and so it's been 3.5 years. And I started with a sprint triathlon, which is much more reasonable than an Ironman, and distance-wise. But at that point, and I can give a sense of the distances in a minute or
I should
so.
have asked
But
you that up
yeah,
front, if you could share what goes into
sure.
an Ironman.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So primarily again, so what is an Ironman, right? And it's triathlon, right, which consists of 3 sequential sports, which is you swim, you bike, and then you run. So the sprint that I got into 2019, it's combined is 20 miles, right? And as opposed to an Ironman, which is 140 miles. And but going back to your question, then what was on my mind when I signed for an Ironman? Since the early days in 2019, when I started getting to triathlon, and when discussing with the triathlon club at the YMCA, I told the coach, like, look, my moonshot here, right, going back to Google X, is I want to do Kona, which is again an Ironman event in Hawaii, which you need to classify for, right? And you need to be really, really good at the sport. Is where the pros compete and everything. So that was kind of my North Star when I started training for triathlon, right? That's what I kind of set an ambitious goals. And then I started, though, taking into a phased approach. I start with a sprint, format, which is again half a mile swim, then 12-mile bike, and then 3.2-mile or 5K run. And then gradually I increased to, again, an Olympic format, which is the double distance of that, right?
Okay.
And then I've done a couple of what we call half Ironmans, which is, again, 1.2-mile swim, 56-mile bike, and then half marathon run, or 13.1 mile. And then finally last year in October, was October 23rd, I've done my first, full Ironman in Sacramento, actually, here in California, which was pretty exciting and challenging as well, but very fulfilling. So,
my hat goes off to you for kind of going on that journey. It's one of those things that, I don't know, maybe felt unsurmountable when you started the journey, before you started to break it down into all the bite-sized chunks and the dedication that you needed to make it real. But congratulations, first and foremost.
Thank you. Yes.
So we wouldn't be a procurement podcast without trying to figure out what are some learnings that we can learn and take from that as a procurement professional. And that was what you wrote up on the LinkedIn article that you put together, that we'll actually link to in the show notes for today's episode.
Yes.
I wonder if you could share a little bit about what you did learn from that journey that you think will be helpful for you and also for others, on your procurement journey.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So there are like three, I think I had 3 key learnings there. And so the first one is, again, be open to learn and to fail as well, right? So as I mentioned to you, I made my way to triathlon in 2019. And so I'm not in my 20s or my 30s, right? And so I'm not like extremely young. So I decided to actually learn something new at a later stage of my life, right? So up to that point, I never had a road bike, right? And was the first time I actually learned how to ride a bike in the road and for many miles. I never ran like a 5K before in my life to that point. And but I decided to again be willing to learn. And but I failed as well. Like, I crashed my bike. I did not finish some races I signed due to nutrition. I got injured, right? Training too much volume in the run training. And so the key thing for me to try to translate that into the work and procurement itself is, take the opportunity, right, to get out there and learn something new. So if you've been doing strategic sourcing and category management, like, why not learn more about procurement operations or contingent workforce management, right? And maybe eventually make a move into those areas. Or if you are within procurement, category management for technology your entire career, I'm sure you can learn about marketing, and then be able to be leading or be working in directly supporting that category. So that's primarily, again, some of the first, learn there, to be open to learn and fail. So, yeah.
If I could jump in, I think
Sure.
that's actually one of the things that we see across procurement is that we do sometimes move slowly, and that's because we are afraid to fail.
Yes.
And, a lot of what this podcast is about is trying to give folks confidence to drive change, because, we're sharing stories of folks who have been successful in doing it. And so,
Right.
maybe trying to reduce the risk of being afraid to fail. But
Yes.
I think that being afraid to fail is a big inhibitor
Yes.
for a lot of the change journeys that we actually need to take as a profession.
Yes, no, absolutely. I completely agree. And a good segue for the second key learning, which is so taking the first step and saying yes, right? Or trying to pass beyond, again, being fearful, right? Or apprehensive about something, or being not willing to take risks. So saying yes can really changes everything. So a year before I got into triathlon, right? A friend of mine asked me if I want to join an open water swim, which is primarily you swim in a lake or ocean, right? But not in a pool. And the specific event he was aiming for was actually swim from Alcatraz Island to San Francisco, right? To around the pier, Pier 39, that area there. So my initial reaction was like, no way, this is like absolutely crazy. It's too cold. There are sharks. I'm not fit enough. But then, that night I thought through it, and I was like, what if I try this out, right? What if I try to have a plan? I'm gonna go to the gym. I'm gonna have a swimming plan. I'm gonna be in the pool 3 times a week. Gonna try a couple of drills in the aquatic park for the water, which is cold. I'm gonna have a wetsuit, and then like all of a sudden you start to build some momentum, right? And then the confidence. And then I did the swim, was able to finish successfully, which was great. And I really enjoy, which actually triggered me to join the triathlon club the 4 months after, right? So, which brought me to the full Ironman, which I've done last year. So I think if I try to bring this back to work and procurement, right? So more often than not, Philip, I think we are presented with many opportunities, right? To lead an offsite, or to become a people manager, or take a bigger role, or take into a complex project, present to a conference. But more often than not, our initial reaction is like, no, this is too hard, or I don't feel ready, I don't feel confident. But I think in reality, right, what you would need is take a pause, right, and think. Ask yourself the most powerful question: what if? What if I were to say yes, right? And have a plan, and do my best here to succeed. So you'll be surprised, right, where this can potentially lead you at the end of the journey, right? So that's actually, again, the second key learning as part of the Ironman I shared before.
Yeah, I think of key times in my career where I applied kind of that logic, and you don't really know what you're getting yourself in for, but you know that maybe the opportunity is not going to come around again, and so why not? So I think
why not?
Earlier in my career, I did a year in India that I know I've talked about on the podcast before, in a captive shared service center, where I was so far out of my comfort zone when I did that. But again, thinking, where am I going to get this opportunity to do something wonderful like this?
Right,
Again,
exactly.
I'm not, so I'll figure it out. And then even going and setting up the podcast. I probably, if I went and listened to the first episode of the podcast, I'd probably be very embarrassed to listen to what it sounded like. But if I've never done that, I would never have got to number 550.
You're right.
So completely understand kind of how and not being afraid of what the output looks like when you take the first step.
Yeah, absolutely. Like always, like babe steps are key, and then just the consistency, right?
Yeah.
And it do wonders, right? If you have those two things, and you'll be surprised how far you can go. So. And
so that third learning then,
learning, yes. So the third learning was. So the key thing, we are more capable, right, than we think, using the right tools. And I'm going to give you the context there. So leading me to the Ironman, despite all the training that went through that, which is literally like, I think was 9 months, training 6 times a week, varying from 8 to 16 hours every week. So night before, like I'm still nervous, right? And sure, if I could spend so many hours there on the swimming, bike, and running, ended up being 16 hours and 18 minutes, right? And out of 17 that you need to finish the race, which was great. But during the swim went fine. I got into the bike, 70 miles in. There is a really strong headwind, right? Like 25 miles an hour, make extremely hard to ride back before the run, right? So at that point, in my mind, I'm starting to think, oh, maybe I should quit, right? Your brain's telling like you're not fit enough, you're tired, you've done enough, etc. But then what I decided to do was like, let me trigger a few of the things here, which is a personal mantra, right? Very positive and encouraging. And then I start to smile at others and give word of encouragement to them. And this actually helped me turn in my mindset. And I was able to finish the bike and then get into the run. And in the run, it did not get easy at all, right? At that point, your body just wants to shut down, right? And you can barely eat any gels or bar or anything like the energy bar. And but then I'm like, no, let me just stay in the present moment. And then again, was already night, right? Watch the stars, trees, the moon was a full moon, which was great. And then again, one step after the other, and then I was able to finish, right, successfully. So I started at 8 a.m., 8:05, and then I finished again to 18 or 15 minutes past midnight. So just to have an idea how many hours it takes. But if I try to have this learning then applicable for work, so we go through very stressful periods of time, right? Like a product launch or a deadline to close an agreement, right? Or the end quarter results in procurement or outside procurement. And then it can feel like a race, right? But then the key thing is, again, rely on some of those things, right? Keep your cool and think positively, encourage others that are on the same page as you, most likely, and then this most likely going to prevent you from giving up, right? And then again, what I like to say is like one step after the other, right? Left, right, and very soon you're going to be crossing that finish line and accomplish something really meaningful for you. So that was the key learn there as part of the triathlon experience.
So when you crossed that line, was the feeling one of exhaustion and I don't need to put one more foot in front of the other, or was it, joy and amazement at the achievement? And like, what did that moment feel like?
It's so interesting. Like I picture so many different things. I'm like, I'm gonna cry, I'm gonna be on my knees, like I'm gonna be celebrating, and then was a mix of feelings because I was very tired. Part of me was like angry, part of me was excited. But then I saw my wife, was there by the finish line, cheering me up, and it was really gratitude. I think was the feeling that came about, because this is the most interesting thing, right? When you are doing the triathlon, the race is a celebration day, right? Because you put so many hours into the training. And it's a day to celebrate, right? You're ready. You just, again, need to apply what you learn and right, and keep a good pace and everything else. So at the end of the line, again, it was just gratitude. And I was relieved that I finished actually on time. By the time I thought like I may not be able to finish within the 17 hours. And but it's a big moment. Like there were like 3,000 people, right, participating. And you see all those folks kind of come in the line with you and then just cheering the joy. And but it was primarily kind of a movie goes into your mind, right, for all the journey that you took. And you get a little bit of emotional. Actually, before finishing the line, I was remember all the things that all the effort that took place to bring me where I was. And then when I finished the crossing line, I was like, all right, relieved, but very grateful again for what I was able to achieve.
Well, again, a fantastic achievement. And I have to ask if Kona is still your moonshot, or if really finishing that first Ironman was, was kind of enough.
Yeah, no, look, it's a good question. I think I'm still aiming this year in 2023, right, for a few events. Mm-hmm. So I think I'll do a marathon again. I've done last year in preparation for the Ironman. I think I'm going to do another one. Yeah. And then I'm aiming other 2 triathlon events here in San Francisco, the Escape Alcatraz. And there's another one in New York State, which is a different format, very interesting, which I'm aiming as well. But for the Ironman, I'm going to take a break this year, especially because, again, it takes a lot of time away from home, right? When you are in the weekends, you are out on the road biking or running for, 6, 7, 8 hours. And so, again, it was a lot of time, which is great because I love being by myself and kind of just thinking about different things. And but it's important to be with the family. I forgot to mention, this was part of the why I started to triathlon was I have 2 teenager girls, right, 14 and 16. And part of me is like just to be active, to keep up with them, right? And encourage them to do some physical activity as well. They are both great swimmers and water polo players. And then I want my part of the why for triathlon was to keep up with them and also do an activity together, right, with them and bring them. You joke about Fortnite. The issue we have is like TikTok. They're all the time on TikTok, right? And on their rooms, on the phone. I'm like, no, let's go for a swim. Let's go for a run or a bike or something. And then it's great for them to get some encouragement. I see someone very close to them who is pushing itself and learning something new and being out there. I think it serves as a role model in a way for them, which I'm, again, very grateful for. That's part of the reason why. So, but the goal is to be closer to them. And I think I'm still able to keep the triathlon routine, but taking a break from the full distance so that I don't need to be so many hours away training during the weekend. So
yeah, you have because I went through this process with running and up to doing a marathon, which I know not the same scale of what you've done, but I always enjoy kind of the time on your own as well and the time to think without everything going on. There's also a guilt that comes along with, am I being selfish by spending all this time on my own, putting into this when that there's lots of other things that you could be present and doing, because it does take so much time away from you.
Yes, agreed. Yes. One technique is wake up early.
Yes, that's mine.
Before the kids and my wife watch the sunrise.
5:15, I'm up and out, and then by the time I'm home, then they're just about getting up. So
yes, exactly. Yes.
Well, Vytas, I want to thank you so much for just really enjoyable conversation, for sharing some of your learnings as you kind of grew through your career from a procurement perspective, but then, of course, from the adventure of taking on and competing and finishing the Ironman. Really enjoyed chatting with you and a lot of the insights that you've been able to share with us. So thank you for your time.
No, absolutely, Philip. It's been a pleasure, and again, if anyone is interested to talk more about triathlon or procurement or regional versus global roles, etc., feel free to reach out through LinkedIn. If you just search by my name, Vytas, Vytas, Google or Epic or Intel, I'm sure my name is going to pop up for you. So happy to connect with people there.
There's not much competition for those keywords.
No, there's not much competition. No.
Well, what I'll do is I'll also include a link to your LinkedIn profile in our show notes for today's episode. That will be at artofprocurement.com/podcast. That's artofprocurement.com/podcast. Vytas, one last time, thanks so much for joining me today.
No, thank you. I appreciate it, Philip. Thank you so much.
If this episode struck a chord with you, please do send it to somebody. We grow here at Art of Procurement through word of mouth, and that would be really appreciated. You can also support us by giving us a thumbs up, a star rating, or a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Since 2015, we've built the world's largest free resource for procurement professionals looking to elevate their impact. Our resources span podcasts like this, videos, blog posts, papers, and events. To join us on the inside and to ensure you never miss an episode, a webinar, event, or a post, please do subscribe to our weekly newsletter, This Week in Procurement. You can do that at artofprocurement.com/subscribe. That's artofprocurement.com/subscribe. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.